Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of Countdown to Infinity. I am one of your countdownsmans, James, and I'm joined by the other countdownsmans, Matthew. What up, Matt? How's it going?
It's good. I'm good. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. I played video games all day. Feeling good.
Lucky.
Can't complain. Yeah, I know, right? We are here to talk to you about a sequel, the first sequel, which kind of happened very quickly, and we'll talk about that in a minute, I'm sure. Iron Man 2 came out in 2010, specifically May 7th, 2010. So it came out almost 2 years after the original.
Mm-hmm.
It is a little over 2 hours, which I will say right off the bat, didn't feel like it.
No, so interestingly, I remember this movie being a lot longer than that.
Yeah.
I went into this, it's like, all right, time to set myself up for 2 hours and 20 minutes of Iron Man. And then I saw what the actual time of it was and was like, oh, I'm going to have an evening after all.
it's 2 hours and 5. It's 125, but it doesn't feel like it. It moves along at a very brisk pace, which surprised me because, I remember it being kind of draggy. Like, I remember it being kind of like, get to the point already. But it gets to the point really quickly.
Well, okay, so I have thoughts on that. But if there's anything else you want to say...
Well, we'll keep going here. We'll get over the initial little factoids. Directed by Jon Favreau, again. Back from the original. He's also here playing the same role as Happy, which is pretty sweet. We've got Gwyneth Paltrow back. We've got Don Cheadle now instead of who?
Howard.
Thank you. We've got Scarlett Johansson coming in. Kind of like I didn't forget, but I'm finding I'm having a lot of moments with these movies so far, where I'm like, I knew that at some point Black Widow would have had to have been introduced into this movie franchise. I just didn't quite remember exactly where it was, but of course it was Iron Man 2.
Yep.
We've got Sam Rockwell. We've got Mickey Rourke.
Yep.
And we got Samuel L. Jackson is back. I like this movie a lot, but where do you want to start us off on this week?
Well, I liked it.
Let's give a quick rundown. Let's give a quick rundown of what happened.
Okay.
Give us the plot.
Sure.
What's going on?
So Iron Man 2 picks up. Essentially, this is a movie about legacy. So, and everyone's legacy. Tony's legacy, Howard's legacy, just legacy everywhere. They put a pretty fine point on it because they talk about it in the movie. But basically, it turns out that Tony Stark is dying. He's got palladium poisoning from the palladium core in his arc reactor that's embedded in his chest. And so that's causing him to behave a little erratically. At the same time, it also turns out that Howard Stark may have not been the sole person who was responsible for the invention of the arc reactor and may have kind of shafted his co-inventor. And his co-inventor's son, what's his name?
Anton.
Anton
Ivan.
Vanko and Ivan Vanko, that's right. And his son, Ivan, basically decides that he's going to mess up Tony's day to take revenge for his father having died poor and destitute and unrecognized for his involvement in the creation of the arc reactor. So these two stories are going on. Along the way, Nick Fury sneaks Black Widow into the Stark organization. Tony appoints Pepper Potts CEO of Stark Industries, and Ivan totally hecks with an indie race in Monte Carlo. And then it turns out that Howard Stark had invented a new element and embedded the atomic map for how to create this element in the original Stark Expo layout, and then left that to his son, hoping that one day Tony would A, need a new element, B, have the technology available to synthesize that element, and C, would look at the map of the 1950 odd Stark Expo and then put 2 and 2 together and realized through a series of clues that that was the recipe for this element. Which, of course, he does. And it turns out that this element is a suitable replacement for the palladium in his suit. And he fixes his arc reactor. Oh, yeah. And Sam Rockwell hires Ivan after he messes up the Indy race to build him a whole bunch of new suits so that he can debut them at the new Stark Expo to basically give the U.S. government control of a set of like Iron Man-like suits. In so doing, he creates War Machine when Rhodey takes off with the Mark II Iron Man suit and has Hammer Industries kitted out with a whole bunch of gear. Things, of course, go wrong as all of the drones that Vanko has created for Hammer, he takes them over and starts blowing stuff up at the Stark Expo, and then War Machine and Iron Man team up to take them all down, and that's your big Act 3 set piece. Yeah, so that's Iron Man 2.
Yeah, that's about it. I think you nailed that.
Yeah.
You jumped around a little bit, but
Well,
I think you got that right.
But that's mostly what's going on there.
Yeah, no, that's fair. You mentioned, and this is something that I'm curious about because you mentioned like 1950s-ish Howard Stark. The timelines there kind of are a little odd because, right, like Howard theoretically, well, not theoretically, we know Howard Stark was a founding member of S.H.I.E.L.D. during the war.
Yes.
So we assume that is the early to mid 1940s.
Yes.
And we assume that when he did it, and we have proof of this, with Peggy Carter and Captain America, we assume he was probably in his like 20s. I think we have to assume that.
Maybe early 30s, but yeah.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Is that
he's not in his teens.
No, he's certainly not in his teens. But if we're talking about him doing, like, I'm really curious when the Stark Expo was when he was recording that bit, because Tony was in the background.
Yes,
and Tony was not as an infant, as like probably
7 or 8 years old.
At least, 7 or 8 years old. Which means if that was in the 50s, would put Tony Stark way older than he actually should be, right?
Yeah.
So do we assume that original Stark Expo was sometime in like the 70s, I guess?
Here's where we introduce what's known as the Marvel sliding time scale.
Yeah, exactly.
Where
right.
Certain things happen at fixed points in time. Magneto was interred in a concentration camp in the Second World War. He will have been interred at a concentration camp during the Second World War when they're writing Magneto comics in the year 2200.
Right.
And like similarly, I feel like the S.H.I.E.L.D. was founded during the Second World War, which I guess was like 25 years ago. Right?
Yeah, it's a little weird.
Yeah, so that is a thing that's going to happen. This came to light more obviously with Spider-Man having come out just recently, where it was like, this movie takes place 5 years after Avengers, or whatever it was, except that it can't have taken place that many years after, or 8 years after Avengers, because, like, yeah, that's what it was. It was like 8 years after Avengers, but Avengers happened in 2012, and it was 2017 when this movie came out, which means that the movie is set in 2020, but it's not actually. It's set today. Yeah. So that means that the Avengers actually happened in 2009, but no, that doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things.
Scale.
Yeah, I wanted to bring it up because it is something that I think a lot of people talk about and kind of puzzle themselves on. And maybe, just don't worry about it. Just, this is one of your suspend your disbelief kind of moments. Like, just let it happen. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
All right, so we know what happened. We know that there's some weird timey-wimey stuff going on. Did you like the movie?
I liked it. But I just liked it. So,
okay.
Upon rewatching this one, I felt that it was actually less good than I remembered it being.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
It's still good. Like, it's fun. My worst Marvel movie is maybe a 6 out of 10, right? Like, they're all good. Yep. But as evidenced by my description of the film, I feel like this film is kind of scattered and kind of loosely put together. it's not super cohesive. There's a lot of coincidences that require you to suspend your disbelief in order for them to like pass. Like the movie is just sort of held like this one just requires a lot. The first one, it's like, oh, okay, he's a super genius and he can make a suit. I'll buy that. This one, there's just a lot more like, you're stretching the limits of my willingness to go along with this right now. But a lot of the individual moments are really good. So, while I'm not crazy about the movie as a whole, I think there's lots and lots and lots to like in this movie.
There are some legitimately fantastic scenes in this movie. The first one that I really remembered when it came up was him talking to. Was he talking to Congress? Was that no? It wasn't talking to Congress, but sort of
like
kind
a
of,
Senate
right?
hearing or what
He was,
have you.
yeah, it was a Senate hearing, or whatever it was, the technical term. That is just a fantastic scene.
Yes,
in my
that
opinion.
whole scene is great.
Everything about that scene flows unbelievably well. It's incredibly tight. It starts and it's over, and you kind of just wish there was more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that scene. I'm curious, what are some of the things that you felt you had to suspend your disbelief over more so with this movie than certainly more than the previous two movies we've watched?
Well, the whole elemental creation subplot basically doesn't work very well for me.
Okay.
Like, okay, so Howard Stark comes up with an undiscovered element that he doesn't have the technology to produce. Okay. Yeah. He makes the only place he records this element is in the architectural structure of an expo that he's putting on for a year when Tony is 10 years old.
Sure.
The only place he even obliquely references this is in a film strip that he apparently had archived that Tony didn't even know about, where he happens to say, oh, by the way, I'm doing this all for you. And like, I actually love you, son. But apparently Tony never receives this until it's just exactly the right time for that to occur. And then Tony manages to look at like the inscription on the model of the World's Fair, which thank goodness they still have that lying around the office that happens to say the key to the future on it. And then is like, oh, maybe there's a riddle here. And then takes it home and manipulates it, and then creates a particle accelerator in his basement. The particle accelerator in his basement is maybe the least ridiculous element of that.
Yes, that's what I kind of love about that entire sequence, is that everything else is just so unbelievably far-fetched, and like, yeah, it is a series of unbelievable coincidences that led him to figuring out exactly what it is. But then to just take what he knows, build an arc reactor, throw in that really in my opinion, maybe not stupid, but very silly nod to Captain America.
Oh, yeah.
By using his shield to level off.
Some version of his shield.
Yeah, some version, early prototype version of the shield to level off. It was fantastic. I loved it. It was complete, just absurd. It was great.
Well, that's the thing.
Really
like,
that part.
Each individual scene is actually pretty good on its own. It's only when you step back and consider the whole thing in context that it feels like beyond ridiculous. And I think if the movie didn't feel as scattered to me as it does, where like things happen in weird orders and like that whole subplot doesn't even really kick off until halfway through the movie, and just like it's like some weird construction things going on with this movie, and it's trying to do so much all at the same time that the movie just sort of doesn't hold together very well for me. Yeah,
that's fair. What I kind of liked, I liked what they did with the bad guys in this movie.
Yep.
I have one big sticking point about the bad guys, and I'll get that to it.
Sure.
Get to that in a second. But I like the idea that Whiplash goes after Tony at the racetrack, and isn't there to like, because I feel like he was in a position where he probably, in a good position to actually just straight up kill Tony there. And instead he goes through the whole thing about, you make a god bleed and people stop, maybe believing in that god. And I love that. I think that was fantastic. And I like the fact that Sam Rockwell's character, what's his name in this movie?
Hammer. I keep wanting to call him Arnie Hammer, but no, that's like a famous actor.
It's where is it? Justin Hammer.
Justin Hammer. That's right.
Yeah, I like that he isn't off to, like, he's not looking to destroy Stark. He's not looking to kill him. He's looking to just sort of end him.
Yeah, like embarrass him publicly.
Yeah, embarrass him publicly.
No longer a big thing.
Yeah, which I think is fantastic.
Like they both have goals that are well aligned.
Yeah, which I thought was kind of cool. And I am a huge Sam Rockwell fan, so I love this. I love Sam Rockwell.
Oh, and he's great. He's great at
He
this.
is great, yeah. And so here's my big sticking point, though. I think the casting of Mickey Rourke is the worst thing about this movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think I just don't... There are just some actors out there who fit into roles, and this is like, it's all personal preference, right? Like, these are all biases that exist within our mind as to what actors we feel should be doing what. And Mickey Rourke is not somebody in my mind that should be playing this weird, secluded Russian, like banned Russian, super scientist and becomes whip. I don't know. I just didn't buy it for some reason. I just never felt like, every time he was on screen, I'm like, hey, it's Mickey Rourke. It's not Whiplash.
Yeah,
right.
That's fair.
And that's a problem, is that when a character comes on screen and you see that character as just the person they actually are in the real world, it just takes me right out of the film, and it happens every time. And other than that, I love Whiplash as a character. I thought he was great.
Yeah, like I think that character works really well. I think the plot with that character works really well. If they had cut out the whole like palladium poisoning thing and just done the like Whiplash plot, I think this would have been a much more efficient, better told movie.
Yeah, I mean, well, but then you would need something for Tony, right?
Just something not quite as big and far-fetched.
Well, because like in the comics, in the history of comics, they've turned to alcohol, right?
Yes.
Like, he's an alcoholic.
Yes.
And they've never touched that in these movies, right?
Yeah, they sort of come close to it in the birthday party bit in this one, but that's about it. But you could just easily write that off to a guy who thinks he's about to die. Yeah.
Right?
He's getting,
and that's fair. I understand why, at this point, I mean, not at this point, Disney, but certainly now. But even Marvel at the time was just like, you know what? Let's just stick away from the whole alcoholic thing.
For sure.
We have other ways to make him, do stupid, irresponsible things.
Yeah.
But you still need that, right? So
yeah, he still needs to be acting up and undermining himself along the way for that storyline to work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see what you mean. My biggest sticking point with Whiplash is that they put him in another Iron Man suit at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
He had all the drones, and they were fine, and that made for some great action scenes. And he had the cool whip thing going on. But as soon as they put him in the suit at the end, it was like, oh, it's another Iron Man. He's fighting another Ironmonger.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we literally just did this.
Not even 2 years ago. Yeah.
Not even 2 years ago. We just did this. And I liked what I did like is, and I think some people would complain about it, the sort of I am a huge fan of that final set piece, the fight in the biodome.
Oh yeah.
With the robots and the drones and stuff. That is just super legit. I love the spinning laser beam thing.
Oh yeah.
I love Rhodey being like, "Don't worry, I got this," when Whiplash gets there and fires off his dumb, ex-wife or whatever the hell it was called. And I love the fact that they don't make a big deal out of Whiplash there either. Like, he shows up, he fires the ex-wife, he gets them in his whips, and they're just like, "Hey, remember that thing we did earlier in the movie? Yeah, let's do that again." And it was just over. Mm-hmm. And I love that. I thought that was great. Yeah, I was like, we don't need to beat around the bush with Whiplash at this point. Like, you two are going to beat him. Just beat him quickly. Yeah. Right? So.
Emotional catharsis of the scene. They've they've come back together. They've gotten over their differences. Now they're working together as a team. Of course they're going to win. They may as well just do it quick.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to belabor that fight. So other things I love in this movie, Black Widow completely just dismantling a team of guards while Happy Hogan is fighting the one guy.
Yeah, I think that's honestly, it's possibly like the most memorable scene from the movie. Like, I remember, earlier I said I was like, oh yeah, Black Widow shows up in this movie, but I remembered that scene. I knew that scene existed in one of these movies, and I've kept it in my memory for years. Like, I remember that being like her big entrance into the film, right?
Yeah.
Because we knew at this point that she was Black Widow. We knew that she was Natasha. We knew that she was a spy, basically there for Fury. But we hadn't really seen her in action, and for her to go in there and just completely, as you say, dismantle this entire squad of dudes while Happy's back at the entrance just punching and getting punched over and over again. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
Loved it.
And like Black Widow is kind of like a prototype of Black Widow in this movie. Her character is not very well developed at this point.
No, absolutely not. No.
She's made like just Scarlett Johansson is playing her a little more timidly than she will in future movies. Like, she really gets into the character later on. And it felt more like they hadn't really discovered what the character, like how that character was going to be in the movies, more than like she is acting the character this way. So yeah, it's interesting. But that scene, I absolutely agree. That's the breakout point where you're like, oh dang, this is rad.
Yeah.
One of my other favorite scenes in this movie, it's just a visual, like one-off visual gag in the third act, but it's one of my favorite bits in this. I don't quite want to say in any Marvel movie, but it is one of my favorite gags, is when Tony is flying along being chased by all the drones. Mm-hmm. And he flies under the bridge over the parking lot, and Tony goes by and one car alarm goes off. And then the 12 drones go by and every car alarm goes off.
Yeah, that was really good.
It's like a 2-second scene and it makes me laugh every time.
That scans. It's real good. What are your thoughts on Mr. Don Cheadle coming in and taking over for Rhodey here?
I like him. I like him better than Terrence Howard. I can't see anybody else. Like, I can't see Terrence Howard in that role in the later
certainly not
movies.
At this point.
Not at this point, yeah. Like, no. I feel like if he had still been that character, Rhodey would have developed differently in the later films.
I think he would have been a lot more serious.
Yeah, he would have been a lot more serious and wouldn't have had the legs cut out from under him all the time in the same way that Don Cheadle's version does. And I'm foreshadowing using that turn of phrase, I guess, but I mean that more in the and then I threw a tank at him and everybody just sort of looks at him like, right. Am I supposed to be impressed by you?
Yeah, no, that's fair. I don't know. I think I enjoyed this movie more than I think it's the exact opposite for me. I think I enjoyed this movie more than I remember. I remember really not disliking this movie, because, as you say, and I agree with you, even the worst Marvel movie is still 6 out of 10. I still don't feel like I've wasted 2 hours of my life after I've watched it. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's funny because you were talking about how you felt it felt disjointed and kind of scattered, and I remember it. I thought I remember it being far more scattered. Maybe that's why. I remember it being far more scattered and disjointed than it actually was. And it still is. I agree with you. There's still definitely some pacing issues and putting things where maybe they shouldn't be. But yeah, I don't know. I like this movie a lot more than I thought I was going to like it. And it's been a while since I'd seen the whole. This is one of those ones that I don't think I've actually seen front to back for probably 6, 7, 8 years. It's been a long time. But yeah, I don't know.
I think I was maybe more forgiving of it at the time, and then I've just sort of I've watched it 2 or 3 times since I saw it in theaters, and and just never really sort of sat there and thought about it. It's just been like, oh, it's an action movie. It's fine.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, when I was sitting there watching it last night and trying to actually, like, think about the movie, the issues stood out to me more than they have in the past. And so I think that's where my, like, maybe I don't like this as much as I thought I did comes
I'm
from.
curious because we don't get to Iron Man 3 for a few more movies, right? Iron Man 3 is, I think it was 2013. So we've got like 5 or 6 movies before we get there. So we're a few weeks away from that discussion. But I'm curious if you put Iron Man 3 ahead of 2. Do you like 3 more than 2?
I think so. I have to rewatch 3 because it's been a
yeah,
while, but I think
it's been a while. But you think you like 3 more than 2?
I think so.
Like, this is always, I've always, and this is a conversation that I've had with a bunch of people, and I know it's an idea that, you know, I've seen more than just in my head, which is wishing that Iron Man 3 had been Iron Man 2, and wishing that Avengers 2 had been Iron Man 3, and wishing that Civil War had been Avengers 2 rather than Age of Ultron, right?
Right.
So shifting all of this basically down a little bit.
Well, that's sort of one of the things that I was thinking about watching this too, is that, like, I mentioned in a previous podcast that I picture the cinematic universe, as it were, as a series of acts, like a 3-act story, right?
Yeah.
And the shifting of Iron Man, the 3 Iron Man movies so far forward, is that, like, Tony ends Iron Man 3 on the down note, like the whole, you gotta, you know, bring the character low. He feels out of step with the rest of the universe in that regard. Yeah. His story doesn't fit as cleanly into that, and so a lot of his character development within the overarching story has had to happen in the Avengers movies rather than in his own films, which is just interesting to me. He's such a jerk in this movie, though. That's one thing we haven't touched on. He's so much more a jerk in this movie than he was in the last one.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that one I think that grated on me a little bit. And I guess it, you know, it ties into him being reckless and self-destructive, but it goes even beyond that. He's just more the bad things about Tony Stark in this movie, which they fix a little bit in 3, as I recall.
But again, I mean, I think that that's in line with what's going on, right? Like, he gets to a point, like there is a point in the movie where you see him realize what he's been doing, right?
Yes.
There's a point where he realizes that he's been just a giant dick to everybody, and that the fact that he was dying, you know, wasn't a good enough excuse. But it's an excuse that he thought was good enough at the time.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I think maybe it's, I don't know. I felt like that kept in line with what they were trying to do with this character. I feel like this movie just also existed too quickly, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is not something that we've seen happen again in the Marvel Cinematic Universe with only a movie between a sequel, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's just entirely a studio thing. I assume, you know, there were very important people who made very important decisions and realized, oh shit, Iron Man made a whole hell of a lot of money, and then the Hulk made a pretty good amount of money. Mm-hmm. Well, let's just do Iron Man 2 now.
Yeah.
And I'd be curious to know if, given the opportunity, they would have been like, no, like, let's get through, like, let's do Thor, and then let's do Captain America, and then let's do the Avengers. Or maybe at that point, let's do Iron Man 2, because, yeah, he is the main character of this universe, right?
Right.
Like, at the end of the day,
well, at
it's
this
Iron
point,
Man.
at least.
At this point, yeah, it's Iron Man, and then very close behind him is, I think, Captain America.
Yeah, I would argue that has inverted now, where Captain America is the main character from Phase 2 on. But I agree with you.
Yeah, so, like, I feel like this movie actually would have just been significantly better had it come after Captain America and before the first Avengers movie.
Yeah, I think so. I assume that what like the studio calculus that went on there was like they had these two properties ready to go with Iron Man and Hulk. So that was just like, all right, we're going to do Iron Man. We're going to do Hulk. Iron Man was successful. Hulk was modestly successful. At that point, they spun up production on, like, they spun up pre-production on Captain America and Thor.
Yeah.
Because they're like, all right, we're doing this. Let's begin developing these films. But they probably hadn't put considerable amount of time or effort into either of them to that point. Whereas with Iron Man 2, they were like, all right, well, this made $1 jillion. So
yep.
We're going to do another one of these. Also, it's already cast. We can pull the same direct. Like, we already have the machine ready to go on this. Let's get a new script and do it while we're doing the pre-production on the next two films.
Yep.
So this was probably just faster off the block. So some combination of like, well, this is an easy payday, plus we can do it a lot faster than waiting out another 2 years for Captain America and Thor to go through casting and pre-production and viz dev and the whole bit.
Right. I'm curious, something that we haven't actually looked at, where does this fall on the moneymaker? I'm curious, MCU box office totals is what I think I'm looking for here.
Yeah, previously I've always had the Wikipedia article open, but I forgot to do that before we started recording today.
I have the Wikipedia article open, but I don't have... Okay, so here we go. So the highest grossing... So this one is number 10 on the list right now, which is... Yeah, that's pretty impressive. I'd be curious to know... Or with inflation, it's a little higher, number 8. The problem with checking these, like, where is this on Rotten Tomatoes, is like literally all of these movies are like 80% or more.
Yeah.
And so many of them are tied with one another. That's like, it's probably like still in the middle somewhere. Yeah. I would think. But yeah, I don't know. I liked it. I think it's probably still going to end fairly low on my list. But if we're talking, I mean, let's do it. If we're talking in the last 3 movies, I know this isn't going to be your number 1.
You're
but
right.
Does this beat out the Hulk? Is this better than the Incredible Hulk?
I think so.
I think it is.
Like, yeah, I think it is, but I think it's closer to the Hulk than it is to Iron Man 1.
I agree. But I think it is on and I'll tell you why I think it is. It just because this does feel like an MCU movie, which the Hulk still just doesn't.
Yeah.
Like, it just doesn't really feel like it fits in with the rest of these movies. And I think that's honestly what's going to keep the Incredible Hulk at pretty much the bottom of my list for the next 15 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, for all its faults and foibles, this movie is more fun than the Hulk was. So, yeah, I think it has to win.
Yeah. Well, I mean, somebody's got to win.
Yeah.
Also, what's with the Elon Musk cameo? What's going on there?
Well, Tony Stark is a rich billionaire, futurist, and industrialist, so clearly he has to hobnob with other rich billionaire futurist industrialists. And who else do you think of when you think of billionaire futurist industrialists?
I mean, to be honest, in 2010, I wouldn't actually have put as much weight into Elon Musk as I would now.
Fair enough.
Like, sure, now that would actually make way more sense. But I'm glad that they don't, at least I don't have memory of them doing many of those cameos. Like, it was a little weird. It didn't really fit, but
yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, I think it works. It didn't. It's over so quickly that it didn't detract horrendously from the film. It's a little distracting, but it's not a big deal.
All right, that's fair. All right. Well, is there any last minute things that we want to say about this one, or are we okay to just move on from Iron Man 2 and look forward to the next one?
I think we're okay to move on. I don't think I've got much more to say.
Yeah, I think that's like at the end of the day, I just don't have much to say about this one. Like, it's is an Iron Man movie, but it's not as important as the first one, and it's not as good as the third one, and it just feels like it exists because it made sense to make a sequel to Iron Man.
Yeah, I mean, like, I like that they went for a thematic underpinning on this one more than they did with the previous ones. Like, the previous ones were sort of standard action origin story and, like, just straight action movie, where this one, you know, as I said, it was about legacy. It was about the legacy of Howard Stark, and it was about the legacy of Anton Vanko, and it was about the legacy of Tony Stark and who he was leaving his company to, and it was about the legacy of Justin Hammer and trying to undo the legacy of Tony Stark. Like, that was what this... Like, I mean, every plot line in this movie is about the things people are leaving behind.
Even Nick Fury, right? Like, we're talking about, you know, the future of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we left the end of Iron Man with him being like, hey, we're starting up a team. We left the end of The Incredible Hulk with Tony being the person who goes to the general, being like, hey, we're starting up a team. And now all of a sudden Nick Fury's like, well,
maybe not.
Maybe you shouldn't be on the team, right? Like, maybe that's not for you anymore, which was a great line. I like that. When he picked up that Avengers Initiative, and he's like, maybe I don't want you to see that anymore.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about the legacy of the Avengers. We're talking about the future of the Avengers, and yeah, I agree. I think that pretty much just nails exactly what this movie is about for almost literally everybody in it. Is legacy and the future as well, right? So,
which makes it actually a pretty well placed in its timeline as well. Where it's
That's fair.
And now we move on to the future of the MCU and meet some new characters and develop some stories.
So have we just 180'd and is this now the perfect movie?
No,
okay.
It's not. It tried. I didn't say it 100% succeeded.
All right, that's fair. All right, well, I think that's going to do it. Thank you all for listening. We appreciate it. We would love it if you would give us a little rating there on the old iTunes. So we can get more people interested in the series. If you're watching over on the YouTubes, make sure to like and share and subscribe.
Yes.
I feel gross by saying that. But yeah, no, let us know what you think. Hopefully you're enjoying the podcast. Hopefully you're watching it through a couple things that numerous people have asked me over the last little while, which I thought I would address really quickly here. Where a lot of people would like us to get into the actual plot a little bit more. And it's not it. I mean, the idea is a rewatch podcast. The assumption of this podcast is that you have watched the movie with very recently, ideally, so it's fresh in your mind, and then you come and you listen to us babble about it for half an hour or 40 minutes or whatever. So I don't think we're ever going to get too much deeper into the plot than what we are currently doing. So I hope that is okay, but I don't want to waste too much time. I want to talk about stuff like, the overall idea of the movie, talking about legacy. That's what this movie is about. We want to talk about that. So I feel like there was something else that I was going to address, but I completely forgot.
That's okay.
That's very awkward. I had like two things that people were kind of talking to me about, and I was like, I will bring those up in the next podcast.
Should have written them down.
Should have written them down, but that's fine.
Yeah. To that end, I can speak for myself here. I am reading comments on the videos. And
absolutely.
I am always watching on Twitter. So if you have comments or feedback or questions or what have you, feel free to ship them to me and James, either on YouTube or on Twitter.
Yep. I am at James_LRR, and Matt is at Matt_LRR. So yeah, you can hit us up there. Let us know what you think. Ask us any questions you would like answers to, or at least what our answers would be to. And we'll be back in a week to talk about Thor with dreamy Chris Hemsworth.
Yeah.
He's so dreamy.
He is.
Okay.
Very.
Bye. No, I'm just joking. We're back. All right, let's talk about this one. This post-credit scene.
We found it.
We found the hammer. It's actually a pretty, I think there's more driving montage than there is anything else, really. Coulson gets called away during the movie to New Mexico, and then that's all we see of him.
Land of Enchantment.
The Land of Enchantment, until the very end. Go ahead.
So I was just going to say that the callback to the Land of Enchantment with the license plate, like the square view of the license plate.
Yeah.
New Mexico, the Land of Enchantment. Great shot. Very good shot.
And gets out of his car, looks down at a crater where there's quite a lot of activity, but clearly not shield activity.
With the red
I should mention,
truck.
like it's very like the locals have come out to figure out what this is. He gets on the phone. Yep, he says we found it. Pan down, Thor's hammer.
And then it cuts to black with a thunder crash.
Yeah, and it's just like it couldn't be more in your face about, hey, guess what movie's next, guys? It's like it's not even remotely subtle. It's just like, yeah, the next one's Thor, in case you didn't know.
God of Thunder.
Yeah. I'm excited to rewatch that one, though. To be honest, don't have super great memories of that either. So I'm curious to see what's going to happen.
Yeah. I seem to recall Thor being on my, I liked it. I think I've actually... So, spoilers for next episode. I think Thor has grown on me since the first time I saw it in theaters. So I'm also looking forward to watching it again.
Yeah. It's been a while since I've watched the original Thor. I feel like we're just going to notice a trend where the more recent movies are better than the older movies.
Probably.
With maybe a few exceptions. But yeah, I'm excited to check it out. So...
Me too.
Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Have a great night.